So today we're working on the 74 Road Runner. We're going to be doing some transmission work. This transmission, it's a 727 transmission in here. It's been not acting up, but the stall converter doesn't really work real well. I have a 410 gear in the back, and I want to put an overdrive in it. That's why I put the 410 in it, is so I have a little bit low end street stomping type power, and I can still go on the interstate and cruise 75 miles an hour. That's the whole idea. Okay, my thought is to try to get that, I'll get that cross member out for sure. Not sure if I'll be able to get the new trans up and over inside this cross member, which holds a torsion bar in. In 1974, I think 73 also, this torsion bar mount here is put on rubber. They did that because in 74 the performance world is kind of gone, and for a mid-size they're trying to make this a little bit more luxury-ish, softer riding, smoother riding, so they rubber insulated the cross member. This is where the torsion bars are. So my idea is that I may have to take that off. And the way I have this car set up, since I have nothing on the firewall, I have to mess with brake lines and everything else that I have on my, sitting right on top of my subframe connector. So if I drop this down, I will have to pull the exhaust off and fit that trans in, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get that transmission up and over this. For some strange reason, I think I'm going to not be able to do that, but we'll see what happens. While I'm under here, I might as well show you the rest of the under the car. Now this is stainless steel exhaust, which I will be getting rid of. Not yet, but soon. It's got a standard drive shaft in it right now, which will probably be being changed to more of a aluminum one. This is the rear end here. Now this is a 489 case, you can see right there, and this is an A-body rear end. I have an 1.5 inch lowering block on there. Right there. I have an 1.5 inch lowering block on each side, and I made that myself because these rear ends have a bigger center pin for the mounting the rear end to the axle here. This whole piece here sandwiches the spring with rubber. I used urethane here to make it just a little stronger, but I still wanted to keep this because this is all about ride. This is how they get the ride, try to get the ride better. Then on top of here, there's a really big centering pin. I can't remember the diameter, but it's pretty good size, and that fits into the perch. So I made block that would accept that larger hole pin, and I made a pin on the other side that's the same diameter. And I set this up in 1/2 inch increments, so I can actually lower the car or raise the car back up in 1/2 inch increments down all the way to stock. I also have another block that I can add to this, so I can have a total of 2 inches. So I can go 1/2 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches if I wanted to. I had 2 inch in there before, but the car sat pretty low, and these tires are so big that I did have a little bit of an issue with it, not all the time, but every now and then it would rub, and I think it still does, because these tires are pretty good size. So anyway, that's that side, and then the other side is the same way. See, I just changed these springs. I went with just the 5-leaf. This car came originally with a 6-leaf because Road Runners had the heavier duty suspension in them. The other thing that's missing that normally would have come with this car is the sway bar. I have the sway bar off. That gets mounted up here too. That typically gets mounted up here and goes around and everything else. And then the mounts go onto the frame right here. So the thing of it is, I was a little concerned that the sway bar wouldn't fit because I have a narrower rear end in it. It's quite a bit narrower. So that's kind of the bulk of it. The other thing I have done is the gas tank. You know, back in the day, what you do with stuff is I put a center sump in the gas tank because this car was going to be raced more, and I chose not to after a while. So the gas tank, in my opinion, is junk. I'm going to have to replace it. It's a little beat up too. This is the original gas tank. I cut the holes in it, and there's actually not just one big hole in there. There's like 4 round holes, large round holes. It kind of acts as a baffle inside there. So when you accelerate, obviously the gas comes to the back, goes up that hose into the pump, to the engine, etc. These are my super traps. Over here are the mufflers, super trap mufflers, as you can see now. That's all adjustable. The plate, these are individual plates right through here. More plates you put in, the louder the car gets. I have about half the plates in there. I used to run around with all the plates in each one. It's pretty loud. I decided to turn it down. When I did that, I noticed that, you know, I lost a little acceleration because my carburetor is too fat. But anyway, that's that. Not like the way, I do not like the way this exhaust system fits on it. That's why this is getting changed. It does not come up over the axle correctly. It goes straight over the axle when it should have a little twist to it. And you can see what happened. It's laying right on my gas tank right here. That's a no-no. So there's a lot of little things wrong with the car that I gotta fix, pull out. This is the underneath of the car. It's relatively solid. It does not have any rust in it. I stripped the underneath here, most of it anyway, and undercoated it. Then it looks like I undercoated it kind of heavy, which I don't like. But this is what I did back in the it's probably 90s, early 90s is when I did this. I already have the seats out. All that is out. That's why you don't see any seat studs coming through. That's the battery cable coming up through here. Going up to the starter because, again, I hid all my wiring. All my wiring is, none of it is on the firewall, which I don't like. It comes into a mess. Right, some of it does, right through here. I got some vacuum hoses that come up for my canister. These are my brake lines, which are crap. This is a disc brakes. It has disc brakes on it. That was original. And this is under the car. That's the 340 in there. You can see that I have a Mylodon pan in it that is really corroding. And you can see that my headers, which are the old Blackjack, let's see, they're Blackjack AK5000s. But you can see they hang too low. And so I have hit stuff with it. But there's a lot of little things on the car that needs to be repaired, fixed. This car was done in 2000. So this is 20 years ago. this car was done. So now my thoughts have changed. My tastes have kind of changed just a little bit, and the car needs to get cleaned up because it's annoying me. But right now, get back to that. Was kind of off track, but we're going to be changing this transmission right here. I'll go get the transmission jack. I'll start loosening all these bolts back here, and we'll get her out. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about the 518 or the 46RH. The 518 came out in 1988, and by 1990 I believe they changed the name to 46RH. It has something to do with the 4-speed and the clutch packs. Anyway, the 518 and the 46RH are hydraulic. That's what the H is for, the hydraulic shift, which means that it doesn't take a computer to shift these transmissions. Now they're based off the 727, the A727, back to here. Then they put on this beefy mounting piece to handle this larger overdrive tail section. This is where your overdrive is. It's got a really big spring in there. It's got all your clutch packs and everything. So the 518, like I said, came out in 1988 and then changed to the 46RH in 1990 and went to 1995. This is the rear wheel drive version. As you can see, it comes out to an output shaft here. The 4-wheel drive version is cut off for your transfer case. I like these transmissions because they are the 727, which are strong, and it has the overdrive with it, which can handle just about any power that you feel you need on the street, especially. You can build these up just like you can any other 727 transmission, so they can be just as strong. The disadvantage of this transmission is it's heavier than the 727, and your transmission tunnel in your car may not accept this end of it completely. You may have to do a little bit of modification there. Sometimes there's a frame, the transmission crossmember frame that comes up over here may need to be modified a little bit. And so if that's the case, you got to trim off about half of it, and then you just box it back in again. I have put one of these in my 65 Plymouth. It has a big block, and in order to do that, I'll just touch real quick. You cut the bell housing off right here. You cut that off right around here. Keep your pump there, but this whole section will just come off, and then you get the ultra bell housing, put it on there, and then it'll come with bolts that bolt your ultra bell, your bell housing, and your pump all together right here. What I did was I studded mine on my big block, but they come with bolts. They use them all the time. It's SFI approved. It's very, very thick bell housing. The transmission pan is very similar to the 727, as that it takes the same pattern, bolt pattern, as the 727. However, you'll notice that the 46RH 518 is a deeper pan. This would be very similar size to a traditional deep pan in a 727. The reason that is because the valve body in this it's a thicker valve body, because there's solenoids that drive, solenoids that actuate your overdrive and or lockup if you have lockup. And I'll go into that a little bit more. The lockup is simply a term used because a a torque converter has like veins in it, and the engine will spin one set of veins, driving the fluid to the other set of veins, causing that to spin, then driving the transmission. So there's a percentage of slippage there. And what will happen is with the lockup, it's got a round disc in it that's got clutch material on it, and that sandwiches the two together, the drive of the engine, the drive of the transmission, sandwiches it together through fluid pressure, then locks up that converter, so it's a one-to-one lockup, so there is no slippage anymore. And on this transmission, what I've found, that's good for about 400-ish RPM. Now, that to me is a huge gain, because you've got a 0.68 overdrive coupled with about 400 RPM on the lockup converter, equating to an easy 1,000 RPM drop from your 3-speed transmission, your standard 727. That way you can run a little bit better gear ratio in the back, 373, 410, and still be able to go down the interstate with the overdrive and lockup. All right. To do a conversion like this, you're gonna want to change your standard 5/16 transmission lines to 3/8. What makes these transmissions live is the fluid flow and cooling. That'll make these survive. So you got to have a 3/8 line, and you got to have a really good cooler. The other thing that you want to note is from 1996 and up, these were 46 REs. That means they were electronically controlled. Now, this plug right here is a plug that on the 46 RH and the 518, non-lockup has 2 pins, lockup has 3 pins. The 46 RE has like 6 or 8 pins. I'm not sure, I don't use them, it's computer controlled, I don't do that. So that'll be that. And then your standard neutral safety switches here. Your speedometer goes here. Now this one came off of my 727, fit right in, because normally they had like a pickup, magnetic pickup there. I modified a few things on this transmission, this bus. So I've modified these here, and this is the standard 727, which will fit in there. The other things that I have modified is this boss right here. I trimmed this back. You can probably not see that, I'll show it later. Trim this back, and I trimmed this out. This boss wasn't needed. And then you're going to also see on this side, this is the governor port. This is the port that you're going to use to control the overdrive and the lockup. This is pressure. They say it's 1 pound of pressure per mile an hour or something like that. I don't really know what it is. All I know is I'll put my fitting here, and I'll go to adjustable pressure switches, and I will adjust those pressure switches to actuate the overdrive and the lockup. This transmission is a couple inches longer than your standard 727, so be prepared for that. Now, some people might ask, why don't I just go with a gear vendor? And I think this is a little bit nicer than a gear vendor in some respects. Gear vendors hold a lot of power. You can take that tail shaft off of the 727, put the other tail shaft and gear vendors on there. It's an expensive unit. Where this one, I can just build the whole thing. Or that one, you have to have the 727 built and you have to buy the tail unit. Where this is all one. And I'm going to be building this myself. So this isn't going to cost me a huge ton of money. The other thing I like about these over the gear vendor is a lockup converter. Like I said, that's about 400 RPM. All I can tell you is what I've done, and I've done one of these behind this big block that is behind me, and another big block. This will be my first one behind a small block. This is a small block car. And so this will bolt right up to my LA engine. I have a 340 in there, and it bolts right up. It'll take the standard starter, and the one thing I noticed that you have to be aware of, now this is a 1995, and the flex plate that connects the engine to the torque converter on the regular LA engine, those torque converter bolts, there's one that's offset. On this particular transmission, for some reason, they're all symmetrical. So my converter would not bolt to my flex plate. So I just bought a different flex plate just to get this thing running. I'm putting a stock converter in this for now. It's just going to be test driving and putting around. The engine is a little on the radical side for that, but until I build this transmission, I'm not going to buy a converter and run all the crap through it. So when I do it, I'll buy a converter, I'll have my SFI flex plate, I'll build all this, and then I'll also put a different drive shaft in. Because right now I think I'm just going to be shortening my drive shaft that is already in the car, just 2.5 inches or so, and then we'll get that all going. Because the idea is not to have a dead car in the garage. I want to be able to have this thing run on its own power back in and out, and I've been told that this transmission worked. Does it work? I don't know, but I'm hoping it does. So the levers here, I'm going to use my 727 levers. I have stainless steel compression fittings for this to run stainless steel hardline up to a cooler, where you want to kind of avoid your transmission cooler in your radiator if you can, because that's typically a smaller size. So you want to bypass that and go right to a cooler that is big enough, at least the 3/8. So you want plenty of fluid flow on this transmission. So that should do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the transmission in the car, set it all up, and I took this mounting boss off here, and the reason I did that is because I'm trying to see if I can use the actual floor shifter rod that normally comes down here. I would have to make a bracket, but I may be able to use the floor shifter rod that comes and actuates the 727 normally. This part may be kind of in the way, but I'm not sure how far that rod is supposed to stick out quite yet, but I'll figure that out. And either that or I'll run a cable. I'll set up a cable system. So that's what we got. Let's get this done.